Well, welcome to this breakout session. I hope you've been enjoying EBA Knowledge Day so far. This breakout session is on EBA in humanitarian contexts, and it will be hosted by me as well as my colleague, Veronica Ruiz. My name is Anika Min. I'm on the climate change team at IUCN, and I've been working on EBA with IUCN for almost 2 years now. So today, just a couple of housekeeping things for the breakout sessions. This breakout session will be recorded and available afterward via YouTube, I believe, to registered participants. Feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself and participate. You're welcome to turn your video on if your bandwidth allows, but please keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking. So to get started, I think Amber will be putting the Mentimeter link in the chat, but since this is an interactive session, just wanted to have some warm-up questions to kind of get a sense of who's in the room, as well as what your initial thoughts or knowledge are on this topic. So please go to the link that Amber has put in the chat, or you can go to menti.com and use the code at the top of the screen to participate in these questions. So for our first question, why do you think EBA matters for humanitarian action? What do you think it can add, or what it can offer for humanitarian action, and how those two might be related or intertwined? So once you've joined on Mentimeter, please do, you can, I think, it is one, recovery after disasters, definitely one of them. Hopefully we'll get a couple others. I think you can submit multiple times if you think of new things. Do you also think that EBA could be relevant before disasters as well? So strengthening resilience, holistic strategies, an adaptation plan, again, resilience and strengthening, saving lives. Okay, great. So we have some general ideas on that EBA can improve resilience in humanitarian contexts, possibly recovery after disasters. So for our next question, I get this to go. Okay. How familiar are you with the following? The SPHERE Handbook, and then also the cross-network Is Eba Relevant Working Group on NBS in humanitarian contexts. Just like to see if you're familiar with it already, because we'll be talking about both of these things today. Okay, look, we have a spread here. Maybe one person is very familiar with the SPHERE Handbook, but it seems like most of you are not. And then it seems like there's a range of people who've never heard of the working group, and people who have, maybe are involved with it as well. And for our last warm-up question, which organizations do you know of who are working at this nexus of the environment and humanitarian action? So in any capacity, but really just who do you know of who's working in this space? If you don't know anyone, that's fine too. But just want to get a sense of, okay, CI, IFRC. IFRC actually co-chairs the working group. So Save the Children. I believe we have someone from Save the Children in our working group as a member. And membership is quite open. So at the end of this this breakout session, we'll be giving the contact information in case you are interested in joining. Mercy Corps has also been co-chairing this working group. UN Environment. We also have a couple of people from UNEP involved in the working group. Great. So it seems like there's some general awareness of who might be working in this space. So to move on to kind of the general presentation before we go into more discussion questions later, just want to give an overview of the working group, what we do, why we do it, and then my colleague Veronica will give an overview of why EBA is relevant for humanitarian action, followed by a rundown of the key messages on nature-based solutions in humanitarian contexts that the working group had previously developed. Then I'll be going into the guidance that the working group is developing on nature-based solutions, including EBA, in humanitarian contexts, which is currently being developed in the form of a SPHERE Unpacked guide. And then, again, provide contact information for the working group before we go back into discussion questions. So to start with about the working group, ecosystem services, environmental health, and safeguarding and environmental hazards are often overlooked during humanitarian crises. And that includes both protracted crises as well as conflict-affected fragile contexts, post-disaster contexts, transitional recovery and development, etc. And this degradation of ecosystems and their services exacerbates people's exposure to natural hazards and impacts from climate change, reducing access to safe, sufficient natural resources that are needed for livelihoods and could otherwise undermine long-term development, sustainable development. In addition, environmental and climatic factors play a critical role in the development trajectory of complex crises. However, EBA and other NBS can uniquely contribute to developing cost-effective, novel, and durable solutions within crisis-hit areas and contribute to building immediate and long-term resilience, especially through climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. More shared cross-network and interinstitutional research, learning, and advocacy is needed to transform how humanitarian aid and development is done. And that, to us, means to better consider nature-based solutions and environmental safeguarding as a core component and strategy of humanitarian response. The goal of this cross-network working group is to convene stakeholders across the Friends of EBA, or FEBA, the Environment and Humanitarian Action Network, or EHAN, and the Partnership for Disaster Risk Reduction, Partnership for Environment and Disaster Risk Reduction, or PEDRR, networks that collaboratively address these issues to elevate and advance this work through a comprehensive community of practice. And I'd also like to note that this working group was actually originally called the EBA in Humanitarian Context Working Group. About a year ago, we did change it to Nature-Based Solutions in Humanitarian Contexts in order to be more inclusive of the different benefits that EBA and other nature-based solutions can provide in humanitarian contexts. However, we are still overall focusing on NBS, climate change adaptation, and disaster risk reduction, in humanitarian contexts. So EBA is still kind of the heart of this working group, even if it's not explicitly called EBA in humanitarian context anymore. And as I mentioned, we're developing practical guidance, policy recommendations, and advocacy messaging. And one of those things that we're currently developing is an SPHERE Unpacked guide, which I'll get into a bit later. My colleague Veronica for an overview of why EBA is relevant for humanitarian aid.
Thank you so much, Anika. And I for not turning on my camera, but I will. Can you hear me?
You're fading a little bit in and out. Veronica, sorry, we can't hear you right now.
It looks like she might have been dropped from the call, unfortunately. Okay.
All right, so I'll just keep going, and then if she can rejoin, she can take over the next couple of slides.
Thank you.
So why is EBA relevant for humanitarian aid? Well, the humanitarian imperative of preventing and alleviating human suffering arising out of disasters and conflicts is an area where EBA can contribute. As I mentioned previously, ecosystem degradation can undermine sustainable development and humanitarian gains. Meanwhile, a degraded environment can trigger or worsen a humanitarian crisis, especially in the case of worsening climate change. It could contribute to future humanitarian crises from, say, storms, landslides, etc. Humanitarian operations can also damage the environment further, exacerbating vulnerability and risk in these contexts, which is why it's important to bring in the environment into humanitarian action. At the same time, EBA provides benefits or co-benefits to humanitarian outcomes, including public and environmental health, food and water security and nutrition, and functions against shocks and stresses that are either from the humanitarian crisis itself or from other external ones, since these are often very complex situations where there's multiple factors contributing to a humanitarian crisis. However, when developed with humanitarian crisis affected peoples, EBA can contribute cost-effective and durable solutions and contribute to building immediate and long-term resilience, both helping in terms of the short term of humanitarian action and providing for people in those contexts, as well as potentially helping those people recover from those disasters or from those crises, and again, potentially preventing further ones as well through developing longer-term resilience. Has Veronica come back yet, or?
I think I'm here. Let's see
Okay.
how long it will last. I'm
Okay,
really
perfect.
apologize for the connection problems.
No problem. But you can take it away from here.
Yeah, sure. So, and thank you so much, Anika, for taking it over. So, as Anika mentioned, like as part of the FEBA working group on humanitarian context, where we work a lot is in advocacy, awareness, sensitization. So this is what we did at for the last humanitarian week that was held in Geneva, but also the work that we have been doing at the COP level, at the climate change COP level. So next slide. The idea here behind is like, why EBA? You know, there are so many different terminologies. We have nature-based solutions, ecosystem-based adaptation, ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, and there is so many terms that outside that we really need to be more critical and be precise on what are the messages that we are giving, especially in working together in such, let's say, complicated environment when working and deploying the environmental humanitarian development nexus. So the first idea that comes into mind, like, why EBA? We think about the ecosystem degradation and biodiversity loss. So this is one critical message that we really need to think, like, the degradation and loss of biodiversity in ecosystem may exacerbate the negative impact of disasters, but also of climate change. So that's why, as working group, we are calling for the importance of really focusing on the role that degradation of the ecosystem is playing, similar to biodiversity. Then also, we just not need to think about like what are the solutions for nature. We also have to think the solution for people and nature. And it is given to the second message. We really need to think about what is nature-based solutions giving. Can you go next, Anika?
Okay.
Not on my side. I don't know. I still see the first one, but I can keep talking and then you can. So the idea is thinking about like putting in place solutions that are for people and nature. And that's why the working group we talk mainly about nature-based solutions, but obviously having a strong focus on ecosystem-based adaptation. And why also we call about nature-based solutions and ecosystem-based approaches, because beyond working for nature and people, we need to think about also what are the other multiple benefits. Next slide. The multiple benefits that we can provide by implementing these kind of solutions. Particularly when we think about like the humanitarian context, these multiple benefit can come into, for example, access to clean water or having a secure chain for food. So these are what we are trying in this working group is like to really bring the environmental and the humanitarian communities together and to try to have a common language to move forward. Multiple benefits. So next slide. For achieving this, we need to think about like changing our business as usual model. Yeah, environmental communities, we have a way of working, humanitarians another one, but how we do this together? We are in a point right now that it is no choice and we really need to work together. So that's why we need a paradigm shift for working together and thinking more about like how we can put in place solutions that are running at the longer term, but also that they are applied and designed at the landscape level, and to go beyond this the mindset of project-based, site-based projects really running just at the short term. But obviously, to make this paradigm shift happen, we really need to think about like how we can collaborate more together. Next slide. How we can collaborate more together. How we can put in place real participatory processes that will help us in setting up this common language that we need to put in place for addressing all the impacts that the society is living nowadays, is facing nowadays. And for this is very important when we talk about collaborative approaches or participatory, not just to think about like bringing all the technical actors on board. We need to bring all the different groups on board. And here we talk about youth, we talk about our elderlies, we talk about women, etc., etc. And it doesn't matter only like we are an adult. So we really need to also think about like how we can use this common language to also put in place an intergenerational dialogue. We need to learn from our elderlies, but also we need to learn from the youth. What are the options that we are leaving for future generations? We need to change to make this happen? So that's why it's very important, and we have these intergenerational dialogues to be also able to identify what are the major risks, what are the perceptions, because every group will perceive risk in a different way. So we need to put these systems in place. And finally, by doing this, what we need to do as well is to work across sectors. We need to coordinate. We need to talk to each other. It's something that is coming more and more of commonly, is to think about like breaking the silos. Yes, that's great. Theoretical, that's great. It looks really amazing when you hear breaking the silos. But how we are doing it? Are we really willing to do it, or are we still willing to keep working in our own silos just because it's what is interesting for each of the different organizations? Now we really need to, coming back to message number 4 about having those approaches in a more collaborative way. We really need to think about like what is needed to make this common language to happen. And finally, even though we have all the different ingredients for a successful equation, what we really need to think about is like how we make impact. And the impact, it comes when we talk about policy. How how can also happen a change in the policy level. And obviously, and none of us will like to talk about money, but to make this happen, we also need to have more financing targeting this type of mindset change that we all need to keep working across the different silos. And I think I will hand over to you, Annika. So maybe you can have a more insight about the guidance, which is one of the works that we are doing across different sectors and really trying to break the silos. But before I hand over to you, a special note for all the different organizations that endorsed those messages that were released for the COP26. And this is a clear example of how this can be done together if we want to do so.
Thank you, Veronica. Really appreciate that overview of the key messages. And as you're noting, we really need to, we have these key messages, we have this policy advocacy, but how are we going to actually collaboratively implement that? How are we going to get it to the humanitarian practitioners who we hope will be using them? And one way that we are doing this is creating guidance. And currently in this early phase of creating guidance, which is a very longer term process, we are creating a Sphere Unpacked guide. So for the folks who are unfamiliar with Sphere, the Sphere Handbook is one of the most widely known and internationally recognized tools for the delivery of humanitarian response. Its guidance is used across the globe by NGOs, UN agencies, and government bodies when planning, delivering, and evaluating humanitarian operations. The handbook comprises the Humanitarian Charter, the protection principles, the core humanitarian standards, and minimum humanitarian standards in 4 crucial areas of response: water supply, sanitation and hygiene, promotion or WASH, food security and nutrition, shelter and settlement, and health. Complementary to the handbook, there's additional Sphere guidance on the humanitarian response available, including in the form of an unpacked guide, which focuses on a specific topic or context. A previous unpacked guide focused on using the Sphere standards in urban settings. Now, we are also developing an unpacked guide with the working group, and our unpacked guide will outline how NBS such as EBA, provide sustainable solutions to humanitarian action, identify practical relevance to spheres foundational and technical chapters, so also making those connections between EBA and other NBS and WASH, food security, nutrition, shelter, and health. We will also identify best practices for planning, designing, implementing, and monitoring NBS, including EBA approaches in affected communities as part of different parts of the disaster cycle. So preparedness, response, and early recovery and resilience strategies. We also envision that the Unpacked Guide will offer practical tools, approaches, and resources for applying NBS in humanitarian contexts. And as part of that, we've developed a resource repository, which will contribute to the practical tools and resources that we provide in this guide. That includes information from various sources on both NBS and EBA, as well as humanitarian action and how those two intersect. Okay, so as I already mentioned, there is an urban Unpacked Guide which exists, and so we're kind of patterning after that. But essentially, an Unpacked Guide is mapped to those sphere humanitarian standards. It doesn't develop new minimum standards, but it does provide tools and approaches for applying those sphere standards to specific humanitarian contexts. In our case, we would be talking about how to use NBS in humanitarian contexts and how that fits into the overall sphere standards. The Unpacked Guide helps practitioners interpret sphere standards in the field, and it's often aligned with other existing partner standards. The Unpacked Guide is not particularly theoretical. We also have a lot of kind of more theoretical information that we've been collecting as a working group, but the Unpacked Guide specifically, as it is oriented towards humanitarian practitioners, will be concise, user-friendly, actionable, and cross-referenced. So some themes that have been emerging as we develop this Unpacked Guide are linkages between NBS and EBA to the do no harm principle, the need for inclusive, gender-sensitive, and people-centered approach, the need to be multi-sectoral and collaborative as well, and to build on local and traditional knowledge and capacities. There's also been an emphasis on ensuring sustainable livelihoods and integrating NBS across the program management cycle. So yeah, just throughout operations as a whole. And as we've already touched on, NBS, including EBA, can help to create a healthy environment which is fundamental to human dignity and well-being in humanitarian crises. So as just a brief overview of our timeline before we go into discussion questions, the NBS Unpacked Guide, we're aiming to have a full first draft of that this summer, and we will be disseminating that to the FEBA network and others obviously in our working group and across other networks to provide feedback on that. We'll also then be piloting, translating, and rolling out this Unpacked Guide in tandem with Sphere, who we are also working with actively, and we hope to have some trainings on how to use this for humanitarian practitioners. We are also looking longer term at integrating concepts of NBS resilience and EBA into those core humanitarian standards and later Sphere other humanitarian standards in the CLUS system. So Sphere is also, the Sphere Handbook is also being revised in about 2 years. So kind of looking ahead, that might be an opportunity for the working group to provide even further input. So here's our contact information if you're interested in learning more about us. Amber, maybe you could put the link to our working group webpage in the chat. And if you would like to learn more or you would like to join, feel free to email me. I'll also put my, or Amber can put my email in the chat. Sorry, Amber. And you're welcome to contact me about that. So to quickly go into the discussion questions, just to go back to Mentimeter, if you have joined late, maybe you could go to menti.com and use the code at the top of the screen or the link in the chat to join. But our first question here is, why do you think the humanitarian sector might lack integration of environmental aspects, either in terms of resilience or sustainability? Are there particular reasons why you think it hasn't been as integrated yet as it could be, or that maybe it should be? There are no wrong answers, just if you have anything, you're brainstorming anything about why there might be this disconnect so far. And if anyone would like to speak out loud, you're welcome to as well. Just feel free to unmute yourself. I can't really see who might be raising their hands. So urgency might be one. In a humanitarian crisis, obviously you have to respond very quickly. Yeah, others were also saying timescales. It's quite similar. Humanitarian sector acts on shorter timescales than the resilience or adaptation or environmental sector. There might be a focus on other pressing issues, different prioritization, focus on saving lives, maybe seeing human factors outside of the ecosystem or lacking an integrative ecosystem approach. And these are all really good points. Lack of readily available information, focus on state and condition of environmental components, time sensitivity, NGS takes time, yeah. Always a challenge when you're trying to do adaptation or other resilience building on timescales. Well, thank you for contributing your thoughts there. And slide. In what areas of humanitarian action do you see EBA being most relevant? And this could be in different stages of the disaster management cycle. So in terms of kind of prevention, preparation, response, and recovery, where do you think that might be most, EBA might be most relevant? Or in different sectors such as health, food security, nutrition, shelter, water, and sanitation, or in other areas too. So I know there's, I mean, in the cluster system, there might also be like other areas that aren't quite as relevant, such as logistics for EBA, but are there other areas beyond like those 4 core ones where you see EBA being relevant? And again, feel free to unmute yourself if you would like to contribute verbally as well. Recovery, long-term response. Empowerment, capacity building, livelihood building, and WASH. So for WASH, are there specific, we'll get to a question on whether you know of any case studies later, but
I actually put this, I wanted to break the silence because everyone here is unmuted and all the cameras are turned off. And so I thought maybe you should get some echo as well. So I put the WASH part because the water part obviously is from the source to the how to treat the wastewater. I think that's very important for the EBA as well, and where EBA can play a part in.
Yeah, definitely. Do you know of examples where that has already been done in humanitarian contexts?
Not in humanitarian context, but I know of problems thinking to use EBA for the wastewater treatment in harsh contexts, but I can't put a finger here, and I can't put a publication in the chat. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for contributing that. It's definitely an area where we're very interested in exploring it in the guide. Are there other sectors where people could see relevance for EBA aside from WASH? I'm also seeing kind of this split between anticipatory action or maybe preparation in terms of the disaster management cycle, and then recovery, longer term response. So it seems like maybe the kind of immediate response, it might not, obviously may not be the priority, but potentially still very important in humanitarian context to either prepare for a potential disaster or to recover from it. So thank you for that. This is a bit related to the first question in this part, but what do you think could be barriers to integrating EBA into humanitarian action?
Annika, just real quick, I still see the answers from why do you think the humanitarian sector lacks integration on the screen. I don't know if that was supposed to change.
Yeah, it was supposed to change.
I can see in Annika's shared screen, I can see the question she's talking about.
Okay, then maybe it's me.
Are you on Menti seeing that, Louisa?
No, this is the shared screen. Oh, then it doesn't matter. Then ignore me.
I can try to reshare it. Sorry about that. How about now?
Is that better?
Still, but maybe it's just, then it's probably just my screen. It doesn't change anymore. That's okay. Don't worry.
Okay, well, sorry if that's happening to anyone else as well. But yeah, if you're in Mentimeter, you should also be able to see the question. So even if you can't see it on the shared screen, you can see it in the app or on your browser. The thing to potential barriers pop up, funding shortage and funding cycles. Those are definitely important. Later on, we'll also have a question on if there's any things that you would recommend for the group, which could also be donors or kind of advice on funding. Timelines, also difficult. Time of benefit provision. So on the time of benefit provision, another reason why we switched from the name of EBA Humanitarian Context and yes in Humanitarian Context was also to make sure that we're capturing benefits at multiple timescales. So even though, say, like adaptation and resilience benefits might take a bit longer, potentially something like contributions to food security and nutrition or water security could be provided on a shorter timescale. So to kind of sell the idea of NBS or EBA for humanitarian action as being a contributor to multiple different needs in humanitarian contexts. Also seeing long-term sustainability in implementing both kinds of action approaches. By both, I'm assuming you mean EBA and humanitarian action. If you mean something else, please do just let us know. Also seeing mandates of humanitarian organizations, which may not necessarily include environmental aspects. Again, mandate of organizations and lack of capacities or knowledge, which hopefully with this guidance that we're developing will be hopefully more integrated into humanitarian organizations as well. They need to collaborate across disciplines and practitioner communities. And then differing priorities, which is why it's so important to hopefully align some priorities through collaboration and expansion of this guidance. Okay, moving on to the next question. I think we've touched a little bit on kind of how the humanitarian sector could implement or could integrate the environment a bit more, but what can we as EBA practitioners do to further integrate EBA into humanitarian action? If you have any ideas, they'd be most welcome. So coming from kind of the environmental sector, what are things that we can do to improve uptake or implementation of EBA in humanitarian response? Networking, policy advocacy, definitely. Being present in humanitarian crises. We also recently had some events at the Humanitarian Networks and Partnerships Weeks, and in one of them we presented a number of cases, and some of those case studies were actually from, we had one from IUCN where a project that was originally designed more for climate change adaptation and restoration then became crucial in a humanitarian context because of a storm that came through. I believe that was in Mozambique, but I'd have to check the documentation there. But definitely sometimes there can be kind of de facto presence in humanitarian crises, but being more intentional about being part of the humanitarian response or recovery could definitely be one way. Publishing best practices, collaboration, guidebook, demonstration of benefits. Also, of course, evidence-based is always important. And I'm conscious that we're coming kind of close to the end of our time. So just to move on to this, do you know of any case studies of EBA being implemented in humanitarian contexts? And I know I asked this a little bit earlier as well, but if you have any case studies of EBA being implemented in humanitarian contexts, you're also welcome to reach out to me after the fact and share that via email. We've also been collecting case studies for the guidance, potentially to be used in the Unpacked guide, and if not, then in further guidance further down the line. So no worries if you don't have any case studies.
And just to mention too, this is Amber speaking, that Louisa mentioned in the chat earlier today about sharing some examples on EBA and humanitarian contexts, including where and how it has already been used. So I think if no one has sort of specific studies to share right this moment, we can also follow up by email with the participants here, especially as Annika, you mentioned the recent engagements at HNPW and how some case studies there could be relevant for folks attending today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Amber. Very helpful. Great, and I think this is our last question before I kind of open it up in the last few minutes, but do you have any recommendations for the working group? So maybe potential areas of focus that you think that are missing, any gaps that you think that we should be addressing, activities beyond the guidance we could be engaged in, potential donors, or other funding sources or things that we could tie into. If you have any comments or recommendations, feel free to let us know. And also, if you have any questions, please do ask us as well. So feel free to unmute yourself, ask any questions, or provide comments verbally. Cases, as in case studies? I assume.
Yeah, I mean, this was coming from me again. I definitely think now this looks very big because I just put that word in. Yeah, I don't know. I think for me, it's still a bit hard to grasp here and there, and it would be really good to get some examples of how this has been used. Like I can see it on a more theoretical level, but especially also considering the challenges with, longer term timelines and sort of the immediacy of working in humanitarian contexts. I feel like cases could be really a good way to be convincing.
Yeah, and definitely also to illustrate what that, like you said, what that looks like in practice as opposed to just theoretically. Yeah, so I've seen some other contributions here in a similar vein to promoting examples and case studies. And seeing also promoting the guidebook and steps to apply EBA in humanitarian contexts. So yeah, those would be part of the guidance. In terms of coffee chats, is that, whoever said that, do you mean just events that are a bit more casual where maybe we have someone come in and talk about a case study or talk about the guidance?
Yes, that was me, Annika. This is Amber. I mentioned that just because I've seen in other sort of communities of practice and working group sort of style collaboration that sometimes a casual coffee chat or, regardless of what time of the day, you may not be drinking coffee or tea or whatever, but having those sort of interactions in smaller groups, but in a directed sort of facilitated way can be a helpful way for people to not only get to know each other and sort of build upon a network, but also to actually see how some case studies may be applicable in their area of work or expertise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you for providing that. Great. And if you think of any recommendations or comments after the fact, feel free to email me as well. I think for our discussion questions, but if you have any questions on the content that we talked about today or kind of about future solutions or EBA and humanitarian context in general, I'd like to open the floor in case anyone has anything to share. Veronica, do you have anything else that you'd like to add? Is she still with us? Or did she drop again?
I think Louisa is raising her hand.
Okay, sorry, I can't see any hands raised. So
sorry, yeah, I forgot about that. Sorry, Annika. Just more sort of another question out of interest. Is there anything planned in terms of sort of dealing with this question? I mean, we already face this question so much when we talk about monitoring for EBA, this question of like timelines and how to deal with them and show effectiveness there. Is there anything planned sort of in that direction and how this discrepancy can sort of be dealt with in this context?
I think that's a great question. I don't personally know about the status of that in terms of the guidance. I believe that we are addressing that in the guidance because it's very important to align those timelines between the sectors and not just have common language, but also common timelines. So that's something that's very important. I don't know if we have any specific plans to address that outside of the guidance at this point, but definitely something to note and something to keep in mind for us.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else have any questions, comments before we move on to the second round of breakout sessions? All right, if not, then feel free to contact me afterwards, but I'll just give a reminder to head back to Talk to join round 2 of the breakout sessions. There's 3 different options: innovative financing for EBA, just resilience and climate justice in EBA, and then long-term visions for climate and biodiversity and the potential role of EBA. So thank you all for participating. It's been really great to have some people, new people who are unfamiliar with the working group, as well as some people who are actually in the working group join us today. So thank you everyone for participating, and it's been lovely to see all of you.